This is the final word with Geoff Lemon and Adam Collins. Thanks to Vidishana Huntaraja for his time with us on the show. News that came out just before we started recording: some additions to the Australian men's white ball squad touring the West Indies and Bangladesh, in theory, over the next couple of months. They've had some players pull out, some of the more senior players, David Warner, Pat Cummins among them, although this hasn't been specified as yet. I don't think who's actually pulling out, but a bunch of players have decided they're not going to go, and some replacements have been brought in.
Yeah, that's right. Trevor Hohns sort of made the point that based on what happened overseas and the toll that it took in the bio bubbles and the hard lockdown back in Australia when they returned, that some of the senior players who were originally in the squad of 23 won't be playing when they go to the Caribbean. They're meant to leave later in June, so they've put these replacement players in there for the time being, and if they get the green light to go to the Caribbean and subsequently to Bangladesh, then they'll presumably make that a smaller squad before they actually fly out. So, yeah, but I mean, Geoff, the great news here is that a player we've been pushing for a long time to get another opportunity for Australia. We didn't really think it would happen though, did we? Dan Christian, he's won everything you can win in domestic cricket on the T20 circuit, and we were litigating the case earlier in the year that who better to bring into the T20 squad in a World Cup year, but didn't really believe it would happen. And here we are, Dan Christian, first name on the media release.
Daniel Christian, Ben McDermott, Cam Green, Ashton Turner, Wes Agar and Nathan Ellis are the ones coming in. But Dan Christian, at the age of 38, having last played a T20 international in 2017 and last played a one-day international in 2014, is in the extended squad. Now that feels like great news off the top. What feels like less great news is that it means he has to come back from England, where he's playing with Notts, quarantine for 2 weeks in Australia, in order to be part of the training camp and potentially not even make the smaller squad that then actually goes on the trip. And if he does that, if he does make that smaller squad, he'll then have to quarantine for 2 weeks in the Caribbean before being able to play. It seems a pretty roundabout way of getting a player to St Lucia from England, which is about a 7-hour flight away, to make them fly back to Australia first and then go through hotel quarantine before heading back out again.
Yeah, that's the bit that stands out to me. So I'm going to take it as read that if they've been named as replacement players, they're going to be in that squad. Certainly Christian and Ben McDermott, who do have to come back from the UK. They haven't even started in the Blast yet. The Blast starts this week. McDermott's playing at Derbyshire and Christian, of course, at Nottinghamshire. Last year, Dan Christian had to go through 5 countries to get back to Australia to quarantine after winning the Blast, as he always does. Winning the Blast last year, he's won every competition, I think. But no, so yeah, you'd hope that if they've made the decision to pull them out of their existing commitments, that they're going to get that chance to go with Australia, provided the tour goes ahead. But you're right, though. How brutal is that? Between getting, I think the direct flight was to St Lucia, which is a BA flight, I've caught it before, is 10 hours from Heathrow. This will be, back from the UK to Australia, 24 or so hours, 2 weeks in hotel quarantine, then back to the Caribbean, which is, I suppose, more than 24 hours. Yeah, it takes a long time to get there when you got to go via the States normally. Maybe they have a charter flight, but nevertheless, it'll be tough going. And then more quarantine at the other end in St Lucia. So it seems an arse-about way of doing it. I have no idea why they're making them do this, but I suppose that there must be some underlying logic, and hopefully that'll be interrogated in the coming days.
Well, my assumption would be that there's preparation being done in Australia in the form of training camps and so on. How much training does Dan Christian need to do to play T20 cricket? I'm pretty sure the guy's played enough T20 cricket before that he knows how it's done, and you pretty much just have to tell him what you want him to do. There is nothing that can be achieved in a couple of weeks in Queensland that's going to change the way that he plays the game at the age that he's at. It seems absolutely insane to me, particularly to be specifying in the press release that they're concerned about the mental health of players after extended periods. The quote is, extended periods in biosecure cubs and hard quarantine have had an impact on the health and well-being of some players and their families. And so in order to offset that, we're going to make another guy go through 4 weeks of quarantine in order to do a week or whatever it is of training in Queensland. It's absolutely mad when he could just be going from the UK and meeting the squad there.
Yeah, and he could go from the UK with some cricket under his belt as well.
Having been playing,
Yeah, and playing that form of the game. And I don't think the quarantine is as bad if you're coming in from the UK. I might be misremembering that. But the point being is that, yes, it makes no sense for what would be a training camp for a 38-year-old. Hopefully they can work a way through that, because it just doesn't feel right to me. Nor Ben McDermott. Hopefully they're in the bloody squad. I'm sure they will be. So I'm taking it as read, but they'd want to be. Or we'll be after them. So that was the news coming out today. But I suppose they'll go from the West Indies. They leave in late June, so they'll be able to get out of quarantine mid-July. They start playing the games in the second half of July, and then over to Bangladesh. I still don't think the Bangladesh part will happen, because there'll be a number of these Australian players, maybe not quite as many as would have been the case, because a few of them are now staying home, but quite a few senior players who've got 100 deals. And I just can't imagine a scenario where the ECB doesn't prevail upon CA and say, look, we really need this to work. We need as many of our international players here as possible. Please find a way of getting out of this Bangladesh tour and get them over here. I mean, the big three look after each other. Surely that'd be a conversation that may not be held publicly, and may not be the sort of conversation we're ever privy to in a media release or anything like that, but at least subtly.
But wouldn't you think that some of the players who are likely to be missing, who are skipping this tour, as in Warner, Cummins, maybe Smith is among them?
Yeah, we don't know.
Maybe
Maxwell. We don't know. This is the point. Yeah, we don't. There's been no information.
No, but a lot of the players who were in the IPL are the ones who are going to be theoretically featuring in the 100. You would think that they'd be the ones who'd be fairly likely to skip the West Indies tour, stay in Australia, which means they can go straight into the UK with no quarantine, basically, or with minimal quarantine.
Minimal, yeah.
And then end up playing in the 100. And that could be a sort of elegant enough way that CA can make sure that its 100 players are in the 100, but still have a squad in Bangladesh playing at the same time.
Yeah, bit of a watch this space on that one, I reckon.
Yep. So that's where we're going with that. Before we reach the halfway break, actually, it's much more than halfway. We're a fair way of the way through the show already. But it is time to play a little game called Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge. You heard it right, and you heard it here first. It's a game that we play with people on our Patreon page because it takes us several days a week to make this show and the other show. We need support, and people support us by sending in contributions. And instead of sending in normal amounts of money, they send in very specific amounts that relate to cricket in some way. This Nerd Pledge number comes in from Dominic da Souza Correa, who is a passionate New Zealand fan. I know this because I've had some conversation with Dominic on Twitter, and there is no New Zealand supporter more fired up than Dominic da Souza Correa. $5.12 was the amount that Dominic sent in. So 512, which could be read as any sort of variation of those numbers. He also sent in a clue, which you don't have to do, but he did. One of the most stunning moments in the history of New Zealand versus Australia one-day international contests. 512. What do you make of it, Adam?
Yeah, I got so close on this, and I want to tell Dominic just how close I got with my first thought, which was the Hamilton chase in 2007 to win the Chappell Hadley Trophy. So Australia make 347, and New Zealand get there. I think from the final ball, wasn't it? Yeah, the last ball of the series, they win that game.
Was that the series when Mike Hussey was captaining, and New Zealand kept chasing 300 plus?
Yeah, what I remember it for, it's the series where Brendan McCullum exploded. So, Geoff, remember when McCullum played his final one-day international? You and I were there for that in 2016, it must have been, at Hamilton again. And we did that video for Crick Info where we went through McCullum's career in 50 over cricket. It was a lovely thing to do. But we came back to...
Jeremy Coney calling him a hairy little velocipede whirring up and down the pitch.
That's good stuff. Yeah, whirring little legs, wasn't it, or something like that? But yeah, having done that, I immediately twigged and thought 2007, and then I looked it up and I immediately thought, Craig McMillan hits 5 sixes in his 117, which proved match winning from 89 deliveries in that chase. And I thought, here it'll be 5 sixes and 12 fours. Not quite. 5 sixes and 13 fours. So missed it by that much.
Oof, that's close. That's close. Yep. It's maybe closer than what I came up with because, as I sometimes do on this show, I just accuse our nerd pledges of making typos because I was like, what if instead of 512 it was meant to be 521? Because if it were meant to be 521, that would be what Shane Bond was on when he took his 5th wicket in Port Elizabeth in the World Cup match in 2003 playing against Australia, where Shane Bond ended up taking 6 for, a very famous 6-wicket haul. At the time he got the 5 for, he'd taken 5 for 21. So, and it was a crazy spell of bowling. Got a lot of big bounce off that weird pitch in Port Elizabeth. Got Hayden edging for 1. Gilchrist smashed 18 in quick time and then was smashed on the pad. Fast swinging Yorker. Then there's too much bounce and Ponting edges it to slip for 6. So Shane Bond's got 3 for 15, has a rest, comes back, gets Damien Martin edging behind with the same ball, and then the next ball he hits Brad Hogg on the toe, and he's 5 for 21. And then a little bit later booms through Neil Harvey. Neil Harvey wasn't playing. Ian Harvey. In the next over, clean bowls him, ends up with 6 for 23. But he's bowled all his overs, and so then Andy Bickle and Michael Bevan put on nearly 100 runs, get Australia to 208, and they bowl out New Zealand short of that. But that was one of Bond's big moments with the ball. So then I was thinking, well, if it's not that, could it be related to the 6 for that Trent Boult took during the 2015 World Cup? The spell that Trent Boult had where he took 5 wickets, he took 5 wickets for 1 run in those 2 overs when he took all the wickets. And that 1 run was a wide. So he didn't concede a run off the bat while he was taking 5 wickets through the middle of the Australian innings. So it's not that. 5-1-2. Australia did lose 5 for 10, and they did lose 6 for 11, but they did not lose 5 for 12 at any point during that sequence. So that was the best that I could come up with, Dominic. Not quite there yet, but we can have another look at it before story time on the weekend, where we do Nerd Pledge in more depth.
Yeah, I think the good thing is that there is such a rich history between Australia and New Zealand in 50-over cricket. It could be anything. So I'm looking forward to getting a steer from Dominic and telling the story in full on the weekend.
That's Nerd Pledge. If you want to send us a Nerd Pledge, go to patreon.com/thefinalword, and you can help us keep making this show week in, week out.
And it's been a wild ride since we last recorded, Geoff, because we were talking about, as we have been, reaching James Anderson's 614 Test wickets, and we
616 now.
We did get him. We got to 614. I think we got to 615. Then we hit the 1st of June. 620, sorry. 1st of June, a number of credit cards expire, which means that we have to, we went to about 600 again. And since then, we've piled on 13 more. So we're back to 613. We're now 3 behind Anderson. I assume he will break Alistair Cook's cap record in Test cricket for England this week with his 162nd Test match. I don't expect they'll rest him, so that means that he will almost certainly take more wickets. He's 6 away from 1,000 in first-class cricket. Maybe that can be a goal we can set in the future. But for now, we just want to pull level with him. So if you can get in when you hear this, if you want to pledge and help us get over the top of Jimmy before he starts bowling on Thursday, that would be delightful.
It would. Let's take a quick break and then on with the rest of the show.
Geoff, so many times I've come on in this spot when talking about ZOLEO to note that the biggest problem in my life, my biggest impediment, is I can't get a signal at King's Cross Station. I mean, for me, it's not so much about climbing mountains. It's not so much about being on a life raft. It's about getting up the escalators and not being able to communicate with the outside world. Not always a problem, but sometimes a frustrating part of my life. When do you get the next connecting bus or whatever it is? Well, it happened to me on Sunday. I was heading to Lord's for the first time in 7 years as a spectator. And I was meeting someone at the gate with a ticket, these sorts of things. And I needed to get an Uber to the ground. But of course, no reception. And thus, I couldn't send a text or get an Uber without walking all the way down the street to make that connection. If I had my ZOLEO, if I had the foresight to bring the ZOLEO with me, had I put the pieces together that the tube wasn't running between King's Cross and Baker Street, which was the connection I needed at the time, this could have all been avoided. If I had I had the satellite technology in my top pocket, connected to my belt, as was the custom for a time, in my back pocket. You've got it in your hand right now. It's not big, but it does a lot of heavy lifting.
I've heard that before. Look, the thing is that when you need to send a text message to someone who's waiting with the ticket at the gate and you're not there, ZOLEO, this is the thing that lets you do it when you've got no reception. It turns your smartphone into a satellite phone. Nothing else can do that. You have to buy a satellite phone. They're quite expensive. They're not necessarily for the everyday user. They're more for the getting rescued in a canyon somewhere in the middle of a mountain range, which the ZOLEO can also help you with, by the way. But It's super simple. You put an app on your phone. You turn the ZOLEO box on. It fits in the palm of my hand. Look at that. You can see that on the video. It's light. It's neat. You turn it on, and it then makes your phone connect to satellites many kilometres into space, hundreds of kilometres into space. And it bounces your message off the satellites down to the phone of whoever you want to contact, or the email address. You can send it to an email address as well. So you can send any written communication to any phone number or any email address in the world from anywhere in the world. It's that simple. It's that good. You can be on a raft, you can be up a mountain, you can be at King's Cross St Pancras, and you will be able to communicate with whoever you want to communicate with. That is the power of ZOLEO, ZOLEO.
.com.